do the sex.
Today's locker room talk topic is gold medal worthy squirting techniques, how to make her squirt like a champ. And my guest today is Deana, aka Ruby, who is a silver medalist in the Squirting Olympics, which were held here. Now, this was years ago, but whatever. Once a medalist, always a medalist at the sex club called the Velvet Rope in Portland. Now, to be clear and fair, before you all go running to the internet to look up the Velvet Rope and verify whether this is true or not, the Velvet Rope has, I believe, in the last year or two, changed owners. So they may not have her medal on record. But I believe Deana, because who would make up such a story? I would probably, but so look, squirting is a topic. It's a thing that comes up in sex, and we're going to have discussions about it here on Locker Room Talking Shots podcast, our long running podcast. But after this recording, Deana and I are going to kick back a couple more drinks or something, and we are going to take this conversation a little bit deeper in our Triple X podcast recording. Now, if you haven't checked it out yet, I have a subscriber-only podcast called Triple X, Locker Room Talking Shots Triple X. And this is where I take our conversations to a deeper, dirtier, more personal level. Now, I am going to be talking to Deana even more in depth on the squirting topic, going into some of my own experiences, and that episode is going to be titled Squirt, Squirt, Did It Hurt or Did She Come? And we'll be diving into some of my untold stories, and Deana will maybe be helping me troubleshoot some squirting issues. So don't forget to check that out. It is only $5 a month, and those episodes are super fun. It's where I feel like I can get loose and even more honest and authentic than I am here, believe it or not, folks. So Deana, look, you've been around a long time since this podcast has started. We've talked many times, and you did talk about this squirting experience in one of our very first episodes. Why don't you remind listeners what that was, who you are, and some of the other podcasts you've been on?
Sure. So that was I believe it was the Water Sports was what it was called, the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
One of the early ones. It was shot live on location for our girls' weekend on the coast. It was fun.
What was the last one? We just published one.
Oh, Spanking.
Spanking. That was real popular because all my
Yeah,
listeners
that's a good one.
are dirty motherfuckers. And what I learned from the last set of recordings we did is these dirty fuckers out there love spanking like we do.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? Who doesn't every once in a while either want to enjoy or deliver a good spanking? And you were, again, the silver medalist. Do you remember the name of the competition?
So the Velvet Rope held the Sex Olympics.
The Sex Olympics, yes. Okay, let's leave it at that because I am going to have you retell that story. But first, I don't know what you're drinking, but I broke out a White Claw. It's early enough in the day that I can't go for the hard stuff, but it's been enough of a day that I needed something. A little sauce. Let's raise our glasses and get ready to talk about sex.
Let's do it.
Cheers. First of all, the question that is always on everyone's mind, and I've looked it up many times, even though I kind of know what squirting is. It's like, I decided I wanted to really look up what is squirting. And I'm going to add sort of the information I've gathered. Feel free to add in any information you have. You know, there's always the argument, is squirting peeing? Is there pee in squirting? Is it something else? And what I gather from all of the research I've done over time, and of course there's always new studies that come out, is that people don't actually really know. Here is what I do know. Scientists agree on one thing: the squirting orgasm exists. What they don't agree on or haven't figured out, because let's be honest, modern day science knows very little about women and vulva owners' pleasure. And that's just fucking true. And
Yep.
so they don't agree on what it is exactly. They don't even agree on what causes it to happen. Although we'll get into what you think causes it to happen, what I've read causes it to happen, and what I wish motherfuckers would stop doing when they want to make me squirt. So it is an orgasm that in which there is more fluid, a good amount of fluid,
A lot.
and it can vary. And what happens is that for some people, some vagina owners, the Skene's gland, which is what they like to refer to as the female prostate, will express a white milky liquid. Most of what I've read said is in some cases they can find trace amounts of urine, but they don't agree, I mean, on how much of what's coming out. And I don't know. We will get into squirting stories because sometimes there's so much coming out and it's just very confusing. It couldn't be urine. It couldn't be this milky stuff. I don't know what's happening. But that's, I mean, really, I could not find and guys, when I go and I look up studies, I'm not just grabbing one study and saying, oh, this study is right, because that's not how science works, right? We all know that. There are multiple studies that are done, and you kind of look for where the information overlaps and there's consistency, right? And then we start to imagine or hope that the facts are somewhere in that overlapping information, and it varied widely. Again, that's the overlapping information is it does exist, which we all know. Thank you, those scientists, for telling us that. B, that the Skene's gland can play a role in it with the fluid that is expressed, and C, there does seem to be in some cases some trace amount of urine. Now, what's interesting about the Skene's gland is this: it does not exist in every vulva owner or vagina owner. They have found that Skene's gland vary in the female body, in the vulva owning body or the vagina owning body, and in some bodies they do not exist at all. Which again, I think harkens back to when we're talking about gender as a spectrum. Our bodies show up so differently and inconsistently, and but I won't get into that conversation. So I thought that was really interesting.
That is interesting.
What's your position? If someone were to ask you what is squirting, what would you say?
I would say that it is a type of orgasm. Do I scientifically know what it's made up of? No, I'm not a scientist. But listening to what you said about your research, I had a thought. And I'm really, because, I always look at things from the feminist side.
Mm-hmm.
And, you said that they say that sometimes there's trace amounts of urine. I'm wondering, have they done any studies for male ejaculate to see if sometimes there is a trace of urine?
Right.
Because it goes through the same hole.
Right. Right.
And I'm sure there is.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't ever hear any that ever associated with that. And so it's really interesting to me that is such a focus, because, God forbid women have the power to express in the same way as a man does sexually.
I love that you bring that up, because I will say this: as soon as, I'm sure women have been squirting forever, but as soon as this became more of a mainstream talked about sexual experience, first thing is it was shamed. It was highly fetishized and then shamed. It was, women peeing, and then it was made dirty, and like very misogynistic take on it. And that if you were a woman who did that, then you were like any number of dirty things. And I think that you're right. There can be a trace amount of urine found. I'm confident if we did that kind of study on men's ejaculate, that we would also find the same to be true. It's interesting to me that is shame, that squirting has been shamed. There is no more powerful a tool to suppress someone than through shame, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, and I think it also goes really is tied into the hetero norm, because what is the purpose of male ejaculate? It's to create, right? Procreate.
make a baby.
There is no purpose for a woman to ejaculate. And that's really what it is it's to me it's ejaculation from a woman is what squirting is. And so because there's no real purpose for that it's something that shouldn't be held up and valued. It should be something that is shamed and deemed as, no, you're not ejaculating, you're pissing.
Right. Because we don't prioritize women's pleasure, right?
Right.
But before we get into, because there are a lot of things to answer, is do you squirt every time you have an orgasm? Is it pleasurable? All of that stuff. We're going to get into that. But Deanna, before we dive into that, let's just start with your story. Let's
All
start
right.
with how you became a silver medalist Olympian. Yes, I said gold medal techniques, but I mean, Deanna's had years to perfect her knowledge around squirting, and I believe, Deanna, if you were to enter these sex Olympics today, you would be a gold medalist squirter.
I'm pretty confident as well, only because it was only either my second or third time ever squirting
Mm.
when I did that for these games. So I was very much a green, green person in this at the time. So yeah, I I never really knew much about it except for, like most people, you watch porns and yeah, you see it happening. And I am guilty, as most people are, of going, oh, that's just pee. And I was told, I was asked if I had ever squirted. I'm like, no, I mean, I can't do that. Um, and so that was a challenge. And um, I had a friend, and they took that challenge, and I was shocked. Well, first, I will let you know, I was embarrassed.
Back up. You had a friend who took the challenge. What do you mean? They were like, I hear that you haven't squirted, and I'm willing to
Yeah,
make it
they said,
happen.
oh, it can happen. And I'm
Mhm.
like, good luck.
But this wasn't at the Olympics
No, this wasn't. This
before.
is leading up.
Okay.
So this is like a week or two before.
Hmm.
So, like I said, very new to the game. Um, and so at first I was very embarrassed. And I don't know why, because it wasn't like anyone had any judgment around it, but I think it's just because of, the stigma that was out there.
You were embarrassed when they did it and they made it happen.
Yes.
Okay. So this friend of yours accepted the challenge, got all up in your
Hmm.
pussy, and you squirted for the first time.
Yep. And it was a lot.
Can we talk about how they made that happen? What did they do? They're like, okay, I accept the challenge. Where are you at? What do you do?
So I think it has to do with nerves and hitting the right nerve clusters to stimulate. Um, I mean, I don't know what they did.
Did they use their hand or their
It
dick or a
was,
toy?
yes, it was their hand. And I think it had to do with the position of where it was inside. Um, and I'm sure everyone's pretty different. But it seems to me if you hook up,
Wow, that was a. If you're on our YouTube podcast and you just saw Deanna's hand movement, it was aggressive. It was fingers pointing toward her. How many
yes,
fingers did they put in you to get you to squirt? You just used 4. It was 2. Okay,
it
2
was
fingers.
2, then 3.
2, then 3. So they started with 2, didn't quite get you
Hmm.
there, and they shoved in. Yeah.
And it started like a gentle massage, and then
With the come hither movement. Is that
yes,
you guys know what the come hither movement? So imagine 2 fingers in a vagina doing the come here sort of finger movement. You guys know what I'm talking about. If you don't, go to the YouTube channel and watch
and
what Deanna
also,
keeps doing.
well, I talk with my hands. And also like there was some clit stimulation.
Rubbing your clit with rubbing
Hmm.
it with his thumb. I can see. So the come hither movement is happening while simultaneously the thumb is rubbing the clit, and again Deanna's illustrating that. So that is what you're saying got you to squirt. And
Yes.
that had
Yep.
never happened. How many years ago was that?
8.
Yeah, I was going to say because it's been 2 years since we started this podcast, and I thought it was so about 8 years ago. And
Yeah.
no one had ever done that to you prior, or at least not to the extent
No.
that made you squirt.
No. And it was a lot. It was
And
a
was it
lot.
an orgasm for you?
Yes.
All right, this is where I'm going to pause the story and I'm going to start talking about myths. I did look up all the myths and they are in line with my experience. And I'll talk more about my experience on the Triple X podcast, and I will do some talking about it here as well. But one of the myths is that every time someone squirts, they're also having an orgasm. You can squirt without having an orgasm, which I would say I
Yes.
feel like has been my experience largely. And so you're acknowledging that to be true for yourself as well, right, Deanna?
Mhm. Yes.
Is it for you still pleasurable if you're not orgasming?
Yes.
So the fluid comes out, in my experience, the fluid comes out in a gush or a spray or who knows. And it's pleasurable, but there is no actual, like, what we would consider our typical climax slash
Mhm.
orgasm. Yeah, I've had that experience
Correct.
too, but you find it pleasurable.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, cheers to that. Moving
So,
on,
moving on.
you had that experience. You guys had kind of given it a try, and then I'm assuming
Yep.
this partner went to the sex club with you, Velvet Rope.
Mhm.
Did you know the sex Olympics were taking place that night?
So, it wasn't that night. So, um as we were like hanging out, there was a poster for the sex Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
And my other friend who was witness to it said, "You really need to join the squirting." And I said, "Oh no. Like I just did it for the first time in my life."
Wait a
Like,
second. So someone actually witnessed you have your first squirt?
well, yeah, it was in the sex club.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I was confused. I thought maybe that
Oh,
happened
maybe I didn't specify that.
alone or in private.
Mm-mm.
But so this whole thing is happening at the sex club. The whole idea to find
Yep.
out whether or not you can squirt happens at the sex club. And
Yes.
and you did it somewhere where people could watch.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been to the Velvet Rope. You did not use a private room. You used a more public room.
So in the couples area,
Ah, yeah.
there's the open area.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like off to the side. There's like I don't know if it's like a couch or whatever, but
Right.
it was like right there.
So, folks, you can scroll back through the podcasts we posted here. We have actually done one on sex clubs. So, scroll on back and find out more about sex clubs. And so, a friend watched, and a friend and you and your partner all saw this poster for the Sex Olympics, and you saw that there was one of the athletic columns, one of the skills that you could enter the competition for was squirting.
So it actually wasn't on there, but this friend had been a member of the club for a long time. So they knew kind of what went on for this event because it was an annual event.
Right.
And so she was really impressed and said, and I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. So fast forward to the night.
Yes.
Now, I wasn't planning on
Entering.
being a part, right? I had some fun with my friend who had suggested that, and yet again experienced my second squirt of my life. And she's like, you really need to. And I'm like, this is like my second time. I mean, there's women here who are professionals. But I was like, well, a few drinks later.
You were
I said, why not?
hydrated and you were like, fuck
Right.
yeah.
Let's do it. So I was nervous. I wasn't expecting to do very well. So this is how the scenario goes. So when you sign up, you decide who your partner is going to be to, stimulate you to get the juices flowing.
Yeah.
And so my friend who had suggested, she was I don't know what name we can give them, she's my right hand.
There we go. I like it.
So they had a sex swing set up. And then underneath of it was like
tub,
a mat, like a chuck they use in the that's what I would call it, is a chuck. If you work in the medical field, you know what those are. But basically it was for absorbing liquid.
Right.
And so it was about, I don't know, I'd say it was about maybe 3 foot by 3 foot was the size of it. And it was under the sex swing. So you would get in the sex swing and I forget what the allotted amount of time was, but it was a timed event. So they're like ready, set, go. And then for that time, my right hand would stimulate. And she had some great techniques. She knew that I got excited by impact. So I know I've talked about the licorice rope, as I called it. So she had that and was given some good whips while she was stimulating. And let me tell you, she knew what she was doing.
I did not know a woman did this to you, Deana.
Yeah.
And I've known Deana for a long time, and we've talked about sex a lot. And I'm not sure how I missed out on the fact that a woman was your right hand in
who
this.
it was.
No, I thought it was the guy. Anyways, so wow. Okay.
Yeah. So the buzzer rings, bzz, and that's time for you to get out of the swing. And then what they do is they weigh
the water
the mat to see how much fluid is in there. And you have crowd cheering. And
so you're on stage for this event.
Well, it's not stage. Well, it's in the big area, so there's people gathered around.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. So They weighed it to see who had the most liquid, and I came in a close second.
A close second. Guys, this is like some
Yeah.
real shit. This is Portland. Deanna had competition. I don't know how much you guys know about Portland, Oregon, but Deanna was up there with, I am sure, people who are,
There was like
what.
11 people that were signed up.
So did everyone take a turn? It was like one after the. It wasn't one at
yeah,
everybody at the same time. This
no,
was
no.
interesting.
So, and I forget, it wasn't any more than five. It was only like 5 minutes. It
Okay.
wasn't very long.
5 minutes. Oh, the whole thing.
You had to have a right hand that knew what they were doing. And of course you worked up to, before you got while you're waiting and watching other stuff. And
so you messed around a little bit ahead of time, so you were worked up and excited. That makes sense. It would seem like foreplay would be important. So now, guys, you know the story. You know that this was a legitimate sex Olympic competition in Portland held at what was, at the time, I think one of the primary sex clubs here. Now we have an assortment of sex clubs that both Deanna and I are very familiar with. So let's move into what does it feel like for those of you out there who have never squirted. You're probably like, what does this kind of orgasm feel like? And I think it's called an orgasm even if you don't technically orgasm, because there is fluid that's expressing from your body. Deanna, why don't you share your experience and I'll share what and I imagine it feels different for everybody, but maybe we can get some similarities here.
So, why I personally feel that it's not pee is because I don't get the sensation of peeing when it happens. To me, it just feels like a waterfall is releasing. I mean, sometimes it's just trickling and sometimes it's releasing inside my vagina and is rolling, like the waters are rolling out of the cave.
Right.
So and sometimes it's a rapid and sometimes it's just like, the ice is just melting off the mountains and the little trickle waterfalls are appearing.
Yeah.
But I don't get the same sensation of when I'm peeing. So that's why to me, I'm like, it's not pee because I don't feel like I'm peeing. It doesn't feel like the same liquid escape that I have when I piss.
And that's a gush. Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you. My sensation is different. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I believe that your experience is your experience. But I would say that, interestingly enough, I realized when I started being able to squirt that I had never squirted, mostly because the minute that I would get this sensation like I was going to pee, I would stop whatever I was doing. And when I squirted the first time, and I don't know if I even really remember the first time, but I remember the times I started squirting. I just kind of like ignored that peeing sensation because I was like, I don't think I'm going to pee. And then there was a gush and it definitely was not peeing. Like I knew it wasn't peeing, if that makes sense. Like you just kind of know. You're like, yeah, I didn't pee. Not only that, one thing, there's no scent to it at all.
Right.
It's like
that's what I was going to say.
Scentless.
It doesn't smell like pee.
It doesn't smell like fucking anything in my experience. Maybe a little bit like cum, but I get that sort of like, I think I'm about to pee sensation. And then I'm like, am I going to come? Like, it's the weirdest feeling. And then there's a release. I don't experience it as an orgasm. I think I have. I have definitely had both an orgasm and squirted at the same time, but that's rare. How often would you say you squirt and orgasm simultaneously?
I would say the majority of the time I do.
Yeah. No, not me. I want to talk about the technique a little bit. How do you make a woman come or a vagina owner come? This is like a regular question that comes up. And if you get online and you look for the answer, they're going to tell you kind of mostly the same thing that you did. They will say it is G-spot stimulated. I don't agree for myself. I don't think it's just the G-spot or even necessarily the G-spot. I do.
I think that it can happen without G-spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, is the G-spot really the same in every woman? No.
Mm-mm.
And I hate that question. How can I make a chick come?
Yeah.
Ask her because everyone's different.
Right.
Like,
how
I
deep?
mean, I think
how deep for you do the fingers need to go to stimulate that spot that makes you squirt?
deep.
Deep. Yeah. See, the G spot is not that deep, at least not on me. And even from, what I've read, for me, it's like, yeah, it has to be deeper. The technique that y'all use out there that's really annoying, and Deana, maybe you can pipe up here, but I find I can always tell when somebody's trying to make me squirt. Because they'll shove their fingers up there and they'll jackhammer the fuck out of it. And they'll do that come hither motion in a way. It's so painful and it makes me want to scream. Like, I know what you're trying to do. And now you get no orgasm from me unless I'm going to fake it to get the fuck out of there.
And some women, that may be what they need.
Yeah.
I will say, my current partner, there's like a twirl.
A twirl, a screwdriver, hand movement.
like a twirl. Oh, I like how that goes into the camera. That's really good for anyone who's going to view this.
Head over to
make
YouTube
up for my appearance.
Yeah, you'll see it. I want to speak to the squirting from the other end, meaning I have squirted less than I have made people squirt. And I would like to say the people I've made squirt, I wasn't trying to make squirt. Like, it wasn't like a thing I was doing. I was just trying to give them an orgasm. So one thing that I find interesting is that some vagina owners just seem to squirt when they come. Like, and it doesn't, what I have found, I have mentioned many times on this podcast about the squirter I was with who was a gusher. And maybe we can talk about the different levels of squirting. I've been with someone who would squirt when she came, and it was just like a little bit of water, like some trickles. And it was consistently when she came. I was with somebody who, when we would scissor, that in particular, which was fascinating to me because there was no internal stimulation at all, but would become so excited that they would, a flood would flow into me. So also for me, I was like, oh, that feels like, I usually, there's just, and maybe falsely so, but I think when I'm having sex with women, I worry less about STDs because there is just less. You're not being penetrated. There isn't someone squirting their semen into you. And that was the first time I was like, holy fucking shit. Like, you are literally squirting whatever that is into my vagina. And I will go into that story in depth in the Triple X episode because has only ever happened to me once, but multiple times with that person. And then I was with the gusher that I have talked about here on the podcast in several episodes where, I mean, she would gush like a fucking fire hose of fluid. And just from like rubbing her clit and her getting excited. I never had to stick a damn thing in her. Of course, once something was in her, then it was like, all, get ready. And I think the other thing I want to say is Deanna's not exaggerating when she says, like, the Olympics, like, the amount of fluid that could come out of body from squirting, there is no way you could piss that much.
No.
There's no way you could piss that much. I have never seen anything like that from someone peeing.
Right.
The squirter that was the gusher would actually have to bring water to try and stay hydrated while having sex. I was like, wow. Yeah. Wow, incredible.
Oh, yeah. You need to go drink a a hefty glass of water
Do you,
after
so
a
you,
good squirting.
do you feel dehydrated after
Oh, yes.
squirting?
Mm-hmm.
You literally feel drained.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting,
Yep.
and it's very water like. I will
It
say
is.
my so I have noticed for me what makes squirting the times that I've done it, and I will again go into these stories in depth in triple X. Um, when I was 69ing with somebody, and they stuck their fingers into my vagina, and they didn't do the come hither like 'cause that I find that actually painful, but it was like, yeah, I think what like they did the wave, maybe some corkscrew
Like
was
the
going
worm.
on. Yeah, guys, you're gonna have to go to YouTube. So I'm waving my hands back and forth, or my fingers too. Although sometimes it's three if there's a lot of lube and I'm excited, then we're talking three. And they did probably two now that I think about it. Anyways, just my fingers are up in the air and I'm like, I think two feels safer. It was like they waved it back and forth, but they didn't curl their fingers and come hither. That is a turnoff for me. And it was just more of like a really vigorous, like shaking in the vagina. But deep inside,
Like mixing the cocktail.
mixing the cocktail. Yeah, it's mixing the cocktail, not come hither. And this individual's turn on was like squirting on their face. And I think that excited me too. Like the taboo nature of the fact that this man
Mm-hmm.
wanted me to squirt all over his face. That was, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I can. I didn't tell him that. I kind of was dishonest up front and was like, yeah, I can come all over your face. I don't know. But he clearly had some technique down. Now, let me be clear, while that was fun and taboo in nature and got me off, um, I generally get angry when I can tell somebody's trying to make me squirt on purpose. Because it hurt. Like most of the time, it hurts me. They're so vigorous.
Yeah.
How often do you squirt?
At least 3/4 of the time, if not more.
3/4. So you're a pretty regular squirter,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the time, it is an orgasm for you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, most of the time.
So can we agree when it comes to a technique that maybe the come hither movement isn't shouldn't be your go-to necessarily?
No, I mean, I think that could be like the foreplay inside. Like it can be like a leading up, but I don't think that movement necessarily is what gets the job done.
Yeah.
I think a cocktail stir or a screwdriver
Yeah.
is more effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And I think it's because it's stimulating like everything.
right, it's using all the spots up in the vagina.
Mm-hmm.
All right, some great tips I looked up that I want to share because I looked
Oh
up
yeah.
tips too. I thought one that was interesting to me. Well, of course, they say use lots of lube. I'm like, do we need to tell you guys that anymore? Get some fucking lube, and like if she's dry, just stop. Just stop.
Right.
You're doing everything
Mm-hmm.
wrong. But lots of lube. And then I thought this was interesting. They suggested that to have the vagina owner bear down on the
Like
pelvic
giving
floor.
birth.
Yeah, floor. Yeah, and you know what? I would agree that actually it's something I haven't talked about on this podcast yet, but I'd like to dive into a little deeper at some point. I have more recently found as I've been learning to orgasm, and so maybe this is more for women or vulva owners who have struggled to orgasm, that if I'm getting close to orgasm, if I bear down, I don't know what it's moving into place there, or I like push, kind of like go to kind of push the fingers out with my pelvic strength, that will start to get me off more. Do you have any others? Well, and can I start with like, don't try to make her squirt without asking in advance?
Yeah, I think that's good. Like, don't go in with the intention of, I'm going to do this. Because again, that's a very misogynistic, like, approach to to this. Like, it's not about you doing this to her. And I think, I mean, I don't know how it would be with women partners, but I think mostly you find that with male partners is it's like, I'm gonna do this.
It's an ego thing. It makes them
Yeah,
feel like talented or something like that when
yeah.
they're, yeah.
And so that's the whole wrong approach. I think it's easiest when it's not really the intent. Like if they, so there's like no pressure, there's no jackhammering, but you just, I mean, if you communicate about what's pleasurable, you'll find that it's probably going to happen. You're going to be like, whoa, how did I do that?
Then you can
And I think
recreate
that's
it.
the best approach, you know? Um, and I
May,
think that's why talking's important, like,
right, maybe also starting with learning her body, find the
yeah.
different spots, look up where the G spot is, and then play with her and find it together.
Mm-hmm.
And then find the A spot, which is up deeper on the front. I kind of think this is an A spot, P spot thing. The P spot is up deeper and behind. Find the different spots, find them with her.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can explore how vigorous things should be. And I think
Right.
you shared a good tip right off the bat from sharing your experience. Foreplay, before you got up in that swing, you guys got worked up. And then your right hand, so to speak, she knew what turned you on. She knew
Mm-hmm.
impact play did.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about the experience, I have not, I'm going to be really honest with you guys. I have not squirted much in my life at all. Like, probably number of times one hand. And to be clear, I'm okay with that. And for me, it's definitely been not been the come hither, and it's been just being worked up, being turned on. I think when those first times happened, it was like dirty, someone wanting me to basically rain down on their face.
Right.
Fuck yeah, that was hot. Deanna, let's make sure our listeners leave with a handful of notes.
So first, be comfortable with yourself and don't be all, like, oh man, I hope this doesn't happen. It's okay. It's natural.
You're talking
Um,
to the vagina owner to
I
relax.
am.
If you want
I'm
to squirt, this is it. If you want to
let
squirt,
it flow.
yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree.
Because take that ownership and power that you have as a vulva owner. You have this ability, and I mean, men get to ejaculate all over the place. Why can't we?
Right.
Um, and communication. I know people probably get sick and tired of hearing that communication, but communication is really important. So communicate with your partner, have your partner communicate with you. Um, if they just go in jackhammering, no, that's really a turn off.
Yeah.
You just dive in with the jackhammer. Like
Right.
you need you need to treat the vagina like a first date.
Mm-hmm.
Wine it and dine it, romanticize it.
Mm-hmm. Get to know it.
Spend some time. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I did see as a regular tip for squirting is making sure either you, if you are the vagina owner, you are relaxed. When you start to feel that pressure and think you're going to pee, like get over it, be okay with it, and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Some people are into golden showers. Maybe it's a 2 for 1. I don't know.
Right.
If you are the person who is trying to elicit the squirting experience, be reassuring and
Mm-hmm.
don't be like, don't act in a way that makes the vagina owner feel insecure. And I think a way to help with that is come prepared. Have towels. Have there are sport sheets. That's I think what we've got here. What I've got here. You can get sport sheets that are actually set up for water sports or for squirting or for messes that you can then just take off your bed. You can lay it down on the bed. You can take it off the bed and wash it. They are waterproof. So if you want to even just experiment, get one to lay down on the bed. And so you guys are like, whatever happens, whether it's pee or you squirt, it's going to be fun. And we'll go clean up. You could do it in a bathtub or over a bathtub. I think that would be hard, but whatever. Hot tub, maybe.
And patience, be patient. Both parties, have patience. Because when you try to rush something, it kills the moment and it puts pressure on the receiver.
And understand this, like if you are the person who's trying to elicit the squirting, it's not about you. It's not about you. This says nothing about your ability. Get out of your ego. Get out of your head. This is about your partner and taking care of their body. And watch for their body signs. If you are waving your hands around and they are clenching and flinching, you're hurting them. That's not going to make anybody come. And make sure they know that that's what your intention is. Because maybe they just think you're going to give them a great hand job and they're going to get to come. And the next thing they know, you're jackhammering, screwing, and waving your fingers around like a crazy motherfucker. And they're like, what the fuck is going on?
What are you doing? Yeah.
But yeah, so those are the tips. Bear down. Bear down.
Bear down.
Think you're going to pee? Bear down. Good luck with that. And yeah, I think it can be sexy being on both ends of it. My experiences were sexy. I haven't really sought out to be a squirter. I'm just not naturally a squirter. I haven't sought that experience out much, but I really enjoy it when I'm with a partner and squirting takes place, because then I'm like, oh fuck.
Look what I did.
I'm a guy. Don't do as I do. Do as I say. Oh, fuck. All right. So, guys, I've told you. Sometimes I'm like, I think I have a big dick, too. So every once in a while, maybe my ego gets in the way. But yeah, I guess it did make me feel good. Except for like when I got squirted into, I was like, I felt like I had wanted to know that was something that their body did in advance. So I could have maybe been on top and not had fluid that I wasn't ready for coming into my body. Yeah, so that's the thing. Vulva owners, squirting can happen from vulva to vulva, which is hot as fuck. But please, if you're a squirter, let the other receiving vulva know that might happen.
Gonna say it again. Big C, communication.
Communication, big C, not big
cock. No,
or
the
cunt,
other C,
or
communication.
Clit. Yeah, exactly.
Communication is sexy.
It's so sexy. That's why you come and listen to me every week, right? Because we're communicating about sexy stuff. This is sexy stuff. All of the things that bodies do during sex is hot. And if you're someone who gets weirded out by it, you got to work through that. We got to go. We got to head to XXX. We got to talk about some sexy squirting experiences, because unfortunately in the 45 minutes I was shooting for with this podcast, we just don't have time to get all of that. So subscribe, $5 a month. It's not hard to find. Just click on the link below, hit subscribe. $5 a month. You help support this podcast. You get to listen to some fun shit. You get to learn some cool shit. Take it to bed with your partner. Blow their mind with how much you've learned. Because I know over the last 2 years of doing this podcast, my sex life has been transformed. I'm a new fucking woman. It's wonderful. I'm coming like crazy. If you want to watch this, you just have to put my name into YouTube. The handle is Annette Benedetti, Annette, Benedetti, Benedetti. You can find me on socials, Instagram. Being Benedetti is my personal Instagram account. I'd love to see you there. Or Locker Room Talking Shots. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. You can also find me at She Explores Life. I'm doing a whole bunch of sex toys reviews right now that are going to be on She Explores Life. Well, I've already got plenty there, but also on YouTube. And you can join me on TikTok at Locker Room Talk Podcast. Deana,
Yes.
where can people find you? Because you're also a witchy
Oh,
bitch.
I am. So you can go to my website, gotwitchywithit.com. Also on Facebook, Get Witchy With It.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, Get Witchy With It 777 is the handle there. Also, I'm going to pump something else and promote it. If you are a bi woman or you support bi women, please check out Bi Women Empowered at biwomen.org or on Facebook, Bi Women Empowered, as well as Instagram at Bi Women Empowered.
That's right. We actually also have a retreat that we are going to be doing for all bi women. I will be getting information out on that, but go head to biwomen.org to find out more about that. So many things to tell you guys about. But for right now, head over to Triple X and join us in the locker room for a more in depth conversation about squirting. So until next time.
There.
Ring loop.